Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion. I'm your host, Dr.Franklin Ruehl. Now, the case of the Screaming Skulls. Roll tape.
Now, to tell you about the Screaming Skulls of England. There are many cases of skulls actually screaming or moaning or groaning. Often, it involves someone who is beheaded, such as a criminal or a victim of religious persecution. He's crying out from the grave. In other instances, it's someone who's been buried where he does not want to be. For example, an entity, a human being who wanted to be buried in their favorite home, being buried in a far distant cemetery. We have one extremely interesting case that dates back to 1598 from North Yorkshire, England. It involves an estate that had the unusual name of the Burton Agnes Manor. There were three sisters who lived there, the Griffin sisters. One evening, Anne Griffin went for a ride. A bad decision. Two highwaymen accosted her, demanded her money and jewelry, and when she refused to give them her favorite ring that her mother had given her, they brutally beat her and stole that ring. When she is found, she's almost dead, and for 5 days, 5 howling days, she lingered in bed between life and death, and she begged her sisters to bury her within the walls of the Burton Agnes Manor. But when she died, for some reason, they did not heed her wishes. Instead, they buried her outside in a cemetery adjacent to the manor. And that very first night, they heard this blood-curdling screaming coming from the grave. And that continued night after night, till the fourth night they decided it was time to disinter the body. But then when the coffin was opened, they were shocked to see that somehow the skull had been separated from the body. So they decided just to bring the skull inside and rebury the rest of the body. They put her head in a glass case on a mantle. And there was no more screaming for the next 30 years. But then a new owner took over, and he didn't like the idea of having a skull in the living room. So he reburied it. And immediately, the unnatural screaming began, and it continued till he finally decided he had to bring the skull back inside the manor. Then a new owner took over about 20 years later. He didn't like the idea of a skull in the house either, but he knew the legend of the screaming skull, so what he did was brick it up behind a wall, and it did not make any sounds. However, they tell us that every year on the anniversary of her death, the ghost of Anne Griffin makes an appearance. Now, there are many other cases of these screaming skulls, most of them from England. Any further cases of a recent origin, and again, you'll hear them first on Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion. Guaranteed.
Now, until next time, may the power of the cosmos and of the Screaming Skulls be with you. Yes, yes, yes.